In the major battleground state of Pennsylvania, Republicans have nominated for governor a far-right candidate, Doug Mastriano, who was outside of the U.S. Capitol on January the 6th to protest Donald Trump's loss in that election. Video appears to show Mastriano passing police barricades right after they were breached by rioters. He has said he left the Capitol before the riot. In the state's GOP Senate primary, the race is still too close to call between celebrity doctor Mehmet Oz, who was endorsed by Donald Trump, and former hedge fund executive David McCormick. Neither candidate has acknowledged President Biden as the rightful winner in the 2020 election. Down in North Carolina, the GOP Senate nominee is Congressman Ted Budd, who also refuses to say that Joe Biden won the election and who voted against certifying the 2020 election results. Over on the other side, the Democratic side, voters in some states pushed for change. Pennsylvania Democratic voters rejected moderate Congressman Conor Lamb in his run for Senate in favor of left-leaning Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. Here to break it all down for us, Julian Castro, MSNBC political analyst and former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Also, Kurt Bardella, advisor to the DNC and the DCCC. Okay, that was a lot. A lot was going on. Julian, I'll start with you. I mean, lay out for us your top takeaways from last night's primary elections. I mean, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Well, I'll start with the good. I mean, I think that progressives had a pretty good night. When you look at overall the performance of John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, Summer Lee in Pennsylvania, the challenge by Jamie McLeod Skinner in Oregon's 5th congressional district. These are folks with a progressive track record. On the other hand, in North Carolina, a group of conservative Democrats / Republican super PACs were fairly successful in turning back progressives in a couple of congressional districts. But I think for the Democratic establishment, this sent a message about the mood of voters that they're willing to embrace progressivism. And that's going to have an impact, I think, on races going forward. Starting with next week, in 6 days, is the Democratic primary runoff in the Texas 28th congressional district between incumbent Henry Cuellar, the only Democrat in the House to vote against codifying Roe versus Wade, has a A rating from the NRA, one of the most conservative Democrats in the House, and also is getting a lot of that same super PAC support against a progressive challenger in Jessica Cisneros. So we're going to be watching that, how that unfolds. I think secondly, for Trump, it was a mixed bag of a night. There's no question that the MAGA movement controls the Republican Party, but he didn't win everything. And you look at candidates like Madison Cawthorn, or in Idaho, the lieutenant governor there, Janet McGeehan, who was running against the incumbent governor, Brad Little, in what has become a scarily, frighteningly conservative state that is linked up very closely with white nationalism in its Republican politics. And so it was a bit of a surprise that despite having his endorsement and I think her fitting the moment and the times of the Republican Party over there, she came up short. That perhaps is a warning sign for other Trump candidates, whether it's Herschel Walker in Georgia or a number of others.
I mean, one of the things I've been thinking all day, Kurt, is about what the results can tell us about Julian's point, what Democratic voters are feeling right now and what Republican voters are feeling right now. A lot of Republican voters really are still mad about the 2020 election and not really that disturbed that people are perpetuating that message or lie, if you will. So where do you see it?
Well, I think what we've seen in these elections, Erlina, is that the MAGA wing of the Republican Party has moved even beyond Donald Trump, that Donald Trump's quote-unquote endorsement isn't the number one qualifying thing anymore to win elections. It's whether you adhere to the big lie. It's whether you believe in conspiracy theories. It's whether you subscribe to this absurdity or wrapped in hypocrisy, the exaggerated clickbait nonsense that has become the Republican Party's platform, where they ceded their public square to this kebab of toxic idiocy. That's the qualifying nature right now to win Republican elections, even more so than Donald Trump's physical blessing. Because the reality is, when you look at these candidates and you look at what they talked about, what they ran, there's very little daylight in what they're saying. There's very little daylight between their actual positions and where Donald Trump is. They're just trying to run as the most Trumpy version possible, and that's who ends up winning. And I think when it look at November, and for all the prognostication about Democrats maybe being in trouble in midterms, I would submit that you look at the extreme nature of this party, and a party that's built their platform on taking away choices, taking away freedom, taking away women's health, taking away books. That is not a recipe for electoral success. And Republicans are not doing themselves any favor by moving even further to the right.
So in terms of the message for the Democratic side, given, as Kurt laid out there, the Republican, the current status of the Republican Party right now, an NBC News poll found that 63% of Democratic primary voters said that they want candidates who, quote, propose large-scale policies that might cost more but could bring major change, like in healthcare, climate change, and college affordability. I mean, what are your thoughts about the idea that part of the message is the bigger piece about the democracy and the danger Republicans pose, but also about the nitty-gritty, the policies?
Well, yeah, I think Democrats are going to have to do both this fall. There's no question that inflation and other economic concerns are top of mind for voters going into the November elections. So you have to talk about the bread and butter issues that people are grappling with right now. And you also, though, I think for Democrats in a midterm year, when midterms, it's notoriously difficult to get the base out the same way that you would in a presidential year, they're going to have to talk about the urgency of beating back this Republican extremism, as Kurt said. And to do that, they need a positive vision on voting rights, on police reform, on a number of other things that can amp up that base. Canceling student loan debt is another one. After last night's results, I also think that, and people have pointed this out, that with these candidates that are coming out of the Republican primaries, it starts to remind you of the worst of 2010 and 2012, the Sharon Engels, the Christine O'Donnells, the Todd Akins, the weird, the bad, the extreme, that could provide some gifts to Democrats in November that we were hoping that we would get, but you never know until they go through their primary.
I'm always so excited when somebody mentions Christine O'Donnell, just so that I can remember that ad where she goes, "I'm not a witch. I'm not going to look into the camera and do it because somebody could." That was one of the most amazing moments in American politics of all time. Like, hands down, that is one of my favorite things that have ever happened. I can't believe it was still real. It was real. Lilian Castro, thank you so much for being here. Also, Kurt Bardella,
thank you.
Who we lost in your picture, but thank you as always, Kurt. Always great to have both of you. Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.